Okay, hi everybody. First I want to thank you for attending and congratulations on attending this session. If you work in project management long enough, you are going to see troubled projects. You're going to experience it in one way or another, whether you are asked to take over a troubled project or whether you are involved from the very beginning and it just, got that way. But I find that people don't want to admit it publicly. In a session, in the room, everyone will joke about their projects and how bad they are, but when it comes to signing up for a class or actually openly admitting it, they feel like signing up for a class is admitting defeat. So thank you for attending, and this is, great step. So let's have some fun together and explore how we can rescue these troubled projects. They're a nice challenge, and they're actually, very interesting and a little bit of fun to work to turn them around. So in this webinar, we're going to talk about how do you recognize when a project is in trouble. It's one thing to rescue one, but you need to know when something needs rescuing. So let's talk about that. What are the key causes of project failures? And then we'll get into what we call the triage process. We're going to use the medical triage as an analogy here to talk about how we can save our projects and aligning that with the medical triage process as well. So we're going to identify what needs to be tackled first and how do we save this project, how do we save our patient. And then we'll talk about the project recovering process, and we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about how to avoid the need for recovery in the first place. So we're going to finish on a happier note with that. So elements of successful projects. We've all heard historically from a project management perspective, a project is considered successful when it is delivered on time, on budget, within scope, and of course that it meets the acceptable quality levels. And that's, for the longest time, historically been our definition. Well, that's from a project perspective. But in addition to project success criteria, there are also business success criteria that we need to take into account. Did the project make the business impact that it was designed for? Did it work as expected in real life? Was it accepted and used? And so this is those other considerations that we see here. Were the deliverables successfully transitioned to live operations? Were we able to move from project to operations? Were the users satisfied with the project, and did they use it? What I find, especially with IT projects, we may deliver on time, on scope, and per the defined requirements, and then our beautiful piece of software sits on a shelf. It never gets implemented, and oftentimes for very good reasons, but that was not handled very well. So we like to joke that in IT, we often deliver successful failures because it was success from a project management perspective, but not from the business or user perspective. So, that's a success, or that is what is successful when the user actually uses your project. That we did meet our business objectives and that we did record lessons learned so we can do better in the future, okay? So taking a look at all of these elements of successful projects, let's now move on to what are some of the symptoms of troubled projects. And you can see a list here on the screen. Of course, if you get behind schedule or over cost, or if you're not able to deliver the intended scope, or if you don't even know what that intended scope are, then that's a problem. When I see work that is stalled at 90% complete, everybody keeps reporting, yes, this activity is 90% complete, 90% complete, but nothing gets to 100%. There's a sign of a problem. You've got not enough people working on your project, or the wrong kind of people, or very low morale. Risks are occurring that are catching you by surprise, and that shouldn't be happening. You should be able to anticipate at least 90% of all those surprises, those risks that occur on your project. You get decisions that are not being made from above, or a lot of political infighting. And so these are some of the symptoms of troubled projects. If you have other symptoms, go ahead and chat them in, and I'll share them with the group. So let me know. But in general, whether or not a project is troubled is a matter of judgment, and it's the severity of each of these symptoms. Because all projects have these symptoms to some extent, but how severe are they? In addition to the severity, there's timing. Timing plays a big role in determining the impact to your stakeholders. Did they have warning that the project was in trouble? If this came as a total surprise, then they may be a little less willing to help you. But if they had some previous warning that things were starting to go wrong and that you were aware of it and made them aware of it, then that lessened shock may lead to more assistance and cooperation during the recovery. So once you declare that a project is troubled, the main way that you can calm down senior management and your customers, your clients, is to give them full disclosure of your project's position and the causes, together with your strategy on how you're going to recover it. Now, at first, your strategy may be very high level. It doesn't have a lot of details. It may just be an outline of a plan, what we call a straw man, and that's okay. You're going to work out the details as we move on. But whatever that initial plan is, it needs to have enough to demonstrate that, 1, you recognize that the project is in trouble, and 2, you've identified some root causes, right? 3, you've also identified some quick action that you can take to help stop the bleeding while that longer-term recovery is put into place. And we call that low-hanging fruit. So you've identified some of that low-hanging fruit. These are the things that we can do easily and quickly to help stem the tide, or what we say, stop the bleeding. Number 4, you have considered various alternatives, and that includes closing the project or saving the project, and that you've determined that there's a good enough business case to continue with the project. So that's number 4. And then number 5, that you have a good idea on how to recover this project. Okay, so your initial plan needs to at least include that information. It needs to convey that information so people have that confidence in you. Now, let's talk about some of the causes of failure in projects. And number 1 to me is the main cause, unclear or incomplete scope. It all starts with scope. Scope well defined, then that will lead to disagreements among the team members as to what is really in or out of scope. If the team can't agree, then that will bleed over into your customer, and so then you have confusion and arguments with the customer over what's in scope or not. Let me ask you, if something is not specifically defined as part of your project, will you consider that piece in scope or out of scope? If something is not specifically stated, will the team consider it in or out of scope? In your answer, or think about your answer. But team is going to consider that out of scope. Now, your customer, if something is not specifically stated, will they consider it in or out of scope? And the trouble is they consider it in scope. See, as a team, we take a very exclusive viewpoint. We only are delivering what is specifically stated, whereas from a customer perspective, they take a very inclusive concept or a point of view. Anything they can think of, they just assume is in, unless you specifically tell them it's out. And that's a problem, right? And that leads to many failure. So if we're unclear ourselves about scope and we're not specifically documenting it, we're really running down the bad path, right? Down a bad road. So when we have that, if we have unclear scope, we can't get the client to approve or pay for change requests, and that's true for internal or external projects. We have failed acceptance testing, poor client relationships, a lot of the cost overruns, all those things that may end up leading to getting your project canceled. Number 2 here, unclear or unconvincing business case. Without a business case, you don't know how the project is justified or what the expected benefit is. First of all, if you don't know what that is, you never know when you've gotten it, but also that's going to potentially lead to your project possibly being canceled. And then the rest of these items, if you have unclear scope, it's going to lead to poor planning. If you have bad communications, if you're not communicating with everybody and everyone knows where you stand and what the current status is, then that leads to surprises, and that's just never a good thing on projects. And, then you start getting into chaos where you have changing requirements, unclear priorities. You may get lack of executive support. So all these things just kind of start to compound and add on top of each other so that you now have a failed project or a project that is in need of recovery. So you can see this list. They're all listed out there for you. So those are